When HOA President Karen ripped up my disabled daughter's passport, destroying her dream trip to Paris, she made one fatal mistake. She had no idea I was a Federal Aviation Administration inspector with the power to ground airlines and investigate discrimination. Some people underestimate the wrong father. Karen was about to learn that lesson. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The morning sun cast long shadows across our quiet suburban street as I helped my 16-year-old daughter Emma into her wheelchair. Her cerebral palsy made simple tasks challenging, but her spirit remained unbreakable. Today was supposed to be special. We were finalizing her passport application for our dream trip to Paris, something we'd been planning for 2 years. Emma had been fascinated by French culture since she was 12. Despite her physical limitations, she taught herself basic French using online videos and library books. Her speech was sometimes difficult to understand due to her condition, but when she spoke French, something magical happened. The words flowed more smoothly, and her face lit up with pure joy. "Papa, do you think the Eiffel Tower is really as beautiful as in the pictures?" Emma asked, her words slightly slurred but filled with excitement. "Even more beautiful, sweetheart. And we're going to see it together in just 3 months," I replied, carefully placing her new passport in the special folder with all our travel documents. As we prepared to leave for her physical therapy appointment, I noticed our neighbor Karen Mitchell standing at the end of our driveway. Karen was the self-appointed queen of our homeowners association, a woman who seemed to find problems where none existed. Her perfectly manicured appearance and constant scowl had earned her a reputation as the neighborhood's most feared resident. "Mr. Rodriguez," Karen called out, her voice sharp as broken glass. "We need to talk." I sighed, knowing this couldn't be good. Karen had been making our lives difficult ever since we'd moved to Maple Grove Estates 3 years ago. She'd complained about Emma's wheelchair ramp, claiming it was an eyesore that violated HOA regulations. She'd protested when we installed grab bars visible from the street, saying they decreased property values. Each time, I'd patiently explained that these were medically necessary accommodations for my disabled daughter, but Karen seemed incapable of understanding or caring. "What's the problem now, Karen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level for Emma's sake. "The problem is that your daughter's medical equipment is constantly cluttering the common areas," Karen snapped, gesturing wildly at Emma's wheelchair. "Yesterday she left her chair near the mailboxes for nearly 10 minutes while you got the mail. That's a clear violation of HOA rules about personal property in common areas." I felt my blood pressure rising. Emma was sitting in her chair. She wasn't leaving it anywhere. She was waiting while I sorted through our mail. "Don't try to twist this around," Karen shot back. "I've been documenting every violation, and I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting. This has gone too far." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She understood more than people gave her credit for, and Karen's hostility toward her was nothing new. But today it seemed particularly cruel. "Please, Karen," I said, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. "We're just trying to live our lives. Emma hasn't done anything wrong." "Wrong? Wrong?" Karen's voice rose to a screech. "She's turned this neighborhood into some kind of charity case showcase. Do you have any idea what it's like trying to sell a house with all this disability equipment visible from the street? The Hendersons have been trying to sell for months, and I know it's because of your situation." The word situation hit me like a physical blow. Emma wasn't a situation. She was my daughter, a human being with dreams and feelings and rights. But before I could respond, Karen's eyes fell on the folder in my hands. "What's that?" she demanded, snatching it before I could react. "Karen, give that back," I said firmly, but she was already opening it. "A passport?" she laughed bitterly. "You're planning to take her traveling? How selfish can you be? Do you know what kind of burden disabled travelers are on airlines and hotels? You're going to ruin other people's vacations." "That's enough," I said, reaching for the folder. But Karen pulled it away. "No, I don't think so. As HOA president, I have a responsibility to protect this community's reputation. We can't have word getting out that we're some kind of special needs facility." What happened next unfolded in slow motion. Karen opened Emma's passport and, with a look of pure malice, began tearing it in half. The sound of ripping paper cut through the morning air like a scream. "No!" Emma cried out, her voice cracking with anguish. "My passport! Papa, my passport!" I lunged forward, but it was too late. Karen had shredded the document into pieces and let them flutter to the ground like broken dreams. Emma's passport photo, the one where she was smiling so brightly, so full of hope for our upcoming trip, lay torn at our feet. Emma began sobbing, her whole body shaking with grief. My trip to Paris? She gasped between tears. Papa, what about Paris? I knelt beside her wheelchair, gathering the pieces of her passport with trembling hands. 23 years as an FAA inspector, and I'd never felt rage like this. Not when dealing with negligent airlines, not when investigating crashes, not even when bureaucratic red tape put lives at risk. But watching someone destroy my disabled daughter's dreams pushed me beyond any limit I'd known. You've just destroyed federal property, I said quietly, my voice deadly calm. A U.S. passport is a federal document. Karen laughed dismissively. Oh, please spare me the dramatics. It's just a piece of paper. She shouldn't have one anyway. Karen, I said, standing slowly, do you know what I do for a living? You work for the government, she said with a sneer. Some boring desk job, I'm sure. I'm a Federal Aviation Administration inspector, I replied, my voice still eerily calm. I investigate safety violations, regulatory compliance issues, and yes, I have the authority to ground aircraft and shut down airports when necessary. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Karen's eyes. But she quickly covered it with more bluster. So what? This has nothing to do with airplanes. Actually, it has everything to do with my jurisdiction, I continued. You see, Karen, I know every aviation regulation in the book. I know every ADA compliance requirement for airports. I know every federal law regarding discrimination against disabled passengers. And I'm very, very good at investigating. I carefully collected every piece of Emma's torn passport and placed them in an evidence bag I always carried. Emma, sweetheart, I promise you we're still going to Paris. And Karen here is going to help make sure of it. Over the next few days, I threw myself into research with the same intensity one brought to aviation safety investigations. I started by filing a police report for destruction of federal property. Then I contacted the State Department about passport destruction. But that was just the beginning. I discovered that Karen's late husband had left her a substantial inheritance, including their home and a rental property portfolio. She'd been using her HOA position to increase property values for her own benefit while making life miserable for anyone who didn't fit her narrow definition of desirable. My investigation revealed that Karen had been systematically violating federal fair housing laws. She'd been pressuring families with disabilities to move, claiming their accommodations violated HOA rules. She'd rejected reasonable modification requests without proper justification. She'd even been secretly advising potential buyers to avoid houses near problem residents. But the most damning discovery came when I found her correspondence with a local real estate agent. In writing, she'd instructed the agent to steer families with disabilities away from the neighborhood, claiming they brought down property values and attracted the wrong element. This wasn't just cruelty, it was a federal crime. While I built my case, Emma was struggling. The torn passport had shattered more than just paper. It had broken her spirit. She stopped practicing French, barely ate, and spent hours staring out her window at the same spot where her dreams had been destroyed. Papa, she whispered one evening, maybe Karen is right. Maybe I am just a burden. My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. Emma, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are my daughter and you are perfect exactly as you are. What Karen did was wrong and I'm going to make sure she faces consequences. But our trip will happen, I promised. We're going to Paris and we're going to have the most amazing time. But first, I need to make sure Karen never hurts another family the way she hurt us. 2 weeks after the passport incident, I was ready to act. I'd coordinated with the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the local district attorney's office. I'd also been in touch with 3 other families in our neighborhood who'd been harassed by Karen but had been too afraid to speak up. The first shoe dropped when federal marshals arrived at Karen's door with a search warrant. They seized her computer, phone records, and HOA files. The charges were serious: destruction of federal property, violation of the Fair Housing Act, conspiracy to deny civil rights, and mail fraud. The second shoe dropped when the HOA's insurance company was notified of the federal investigation. They immediately suspended Karen from her position and froze the association's assets pending the outcome. The third shoe dropped when the local newspaper picked up the story. HOA president destroys disabled teen's passport, made front-page news, and the story went viral on social media. The video from my doorbell camera showing Karen tearing up Emma's passport while she sobbed was viewed millions of times. But the final shoe was the one that hurt Karen most. The Department of Housing and Urban Development filed a lawsuit against her personally, seeking damages for every family she'd harassed. The potential financial penalty was in the millions. Karen's comfortable world began crumbling. Her rental properties were investigated for ADA violations. Her insurance company dropped her. The HOA board voted to remove her and ban her from future involvement. Neighbors who'd once feared her now avoided her completely. 3 months after the passport incident, I stood in my living room holding 2 expedited passports. Mine and Emma's replacement. The State Department had fast-tracked our application after learning about the circumstances. "Are you ready for Paris, sweetheart?" I asked Emma, who was sitting in her wheelchair wearing a new dress she'd picked out for the trip. "Oui, papa," she replied, her French accent perfect despite her speech difficulties. "Je suis très excitée pour notre voyage." As we prepared to leave for the airport, I saw Karen watching from her window. She looked haggard, defeated. The for sale sign in her yard told the story. She was being forced to sell her house to pay legal fees and potential damages. Our Paris trip was everything Emma had dreamed it would be. The Eiffel Tower was indeed more beautiful than in pictures. The Louvre amazed her. The Seine boat ride made her giggle with delight. But the most magical moment came when we visited Sainte-Chapelle, and Emma whispered a prayer in French, thanking God for the opportunity to see such beauty. "Papa," she said as we sat in a café near Notre Dame, "I'm glad Karen tore up my passport." "Why, sweetheart?" "Because it showed me that some people are cruel, but it also showed me that you'll always protect me. And now I know that dreams can't really be destroyed even if passports can be." When we returned home, I found a letter waiting for me. Karen had written to apologize, though I suspected her lawyer had advised her to do so. She was facing trial on federal charges, and her legal team was trying to negotiate a plea deal. The letter was full of excuses and self-pity, but one line stood out: "I never meant to hurt Emma. I just wanted to protect our property values." I threw the letter away without finishing it. Some apologies come too late, and some damage can't be undone with words. The trial made headlines across the country. Karen's defense team tried to portray her as a concerned homeowner who'd made a mistake in the heat of the moment. But the evidence was overwhelming. Email records, witness testimony, and documentation of her pattern of discrimination painted a clear picture of someone who'd systematically violated federal law. The federal judge, who had a disabled grandchild, was particularly harsh in his sentencing. Karen received 2 years in federal prison followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was ordered to pay $500,000 in damages to the family she'd harassed, plus Emma's college fund received a $100,000 contribution. More importantly, the case established a precedent that would protect other families from similar discrimination. But the real victory came 6 months later, when Emma started her senior year of high school. She'd been accepted to a French immersion program and was planning to study international relations in college. The girl who'd once been told she was a burden was now fluent in 2 languages and had dreams of working for the United Nations. "Papa," she said one evening as we sat on our front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, "I've been thinking about Karen." "What about her?" "I feel sorry for her. She spent so much time being angry that she never learned to see the beauty in differences. She missed out on so much." I marveled at my daughter's capacity for forgiveness. Even after everything Karen had put her through, Emma could find compassion for her tormentor. "You're a better person than I am, sweetheart," I said, squeezing her hand. "No, Papa. We're both good people. The difference is that you taught me to see the good in others, even when they can't see it in themselves." As I watched Emma practice her French pronunciation, preparing for her next adventure, I realized that Karen's cruelty had backfired completely. Instead of crushing Emma's spirit, it had strengthened her resolve. Instead of hiding our differences, we'd learned to celebrate them. The house across the street, where Karen used to live, now belonged to a family with 3 children, one of whom used a wheelchair. The new HOA president, elected unanimously, was a retired special education teacher who'd made accessibility improvements throughout the neighborhood. Emma's story became a rallying cry for disability rights advocates. She spoke at conferences, appeared on news programs, and even testified before Congress about the importance of the Fair Housing Act. Her speech was still sometimes difficult to understand, but her message was crystal clear. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. 2 years after the passport incident, I received a call from the Department of Justice. They wanted to offer Emma an internship in their Civil Rights Division. My 16-year-old daughter, who'd once been told she was a burden, was now being recruited by the federal government. "Papa," Emma said when I told her about the offer, "do you think I should take it?" "I think you should follow your dreams wherever they lead," I replied. But I also think Karen taught us something important. What's that? That sometimes the people who try to tear us down end up lifting us higher than we ever imagined possible. Emma smiled, that same bright smile from her passport photo, the one Karen had tried to destroy but couldn't. Then I guess I should thank her. Maybe someday you will, I said. But for now, let's focus on building the future she never thought you deserved. The neighborhood began to heal in ways I hadn't expected. The new HOA board, led by retired special education teacher Margaret Chin, implemented policies that went far beyond basic ADA compliance. They created a community garden with raised beds accessible to wheelchair users, installed audio signals at crosswalks, and even started a monthly Neighbor Helping Neighbor program where residents could request assistance with daily tasks. Emma became the unofficial ambassador for these changes. She attended every HOA meeting, not as a victim seeking accommodation, but as a valued community member contributing ideas and solutions. Her suggestions for better street lighting and wider sidewalks benefited everyone, not just people with disabilities. "Papa," Emma said one evening after a particularly productive meeting, "I think Karen accidentally did something good." "How so, sweetheart?" "She showed everyone what happens when we let fear control us. Now people are choosing love instead." The ripple effects of our story extended far beyond Maple Grove Estates. I started receiving calls from other government employees dealing with discrimination issues. My expertise in federal regulations, combined with Emma's lived experience, made us an unexpectedly powerful advocacy team. One case particularly stands out. A family in Oregon contacted us after their HOA tried to ban their autistic son from using the community pool because other residents complained about his stymieing behaviors. Using the precedent from Karen's case, we were able to resolve the issue quickly. The family not only kept their pool access but the HOA also agreed to host autism awareness sessions for all residents. "Every victory makes the next one easier," I explained to Emma as we reviewed the successful resolution. "Your courage in standing up to Karen opened doors for families everywhere." Emma's high school years were transformative in ways that went beyond academics. She started a disability awareness club that grew from 3 members to over 50. She organized cultural exchange programs with schools in France, practicing her language skills while building international friendships. Most importantly, she learned to see her cerebral palsy not as a limitation but as part of what made her uniquely qualified to help others. The college application process brought unexpected challenges. Despite her excellent grades and extracurricular achievements, some admissions officers seemed hesitant about accepting a student with visible disabilities. Their concerns were subtle but clear: questions about whether she could handle the physical demands of campus life, suggestions that she might be more comfortable at schools with special programs. This discrimination was more insidious than Karen's open hostility, but it was discrimination nonetheless. I documented every inappropriate question, every coded language suggesting Emma wasn't welcome. When Georgetown University's admissions officer asked if Emma had considered less demanding schools, I knew we had another fight on our hands. But Emma surprised me. Instead of getting angry or discouraged, she channeled her frustration into action. She created a presentation about disability rights in higher education and requested meetings with every admissions office that had shown bias. She didn't ask for special treatment, she demanded equal consideration. "Papa," she said as we prepared for her meeting with the Georgetown Admissions Committee, "Karen taught me something important. When people underestimate you, they give you an advantage. They don't see what you're really capable of." The Georgetown meeting was a masterclass in advocacy. Emma presented her academic achievements, her volunteer work, her leadership roles, and her future goals with confidence and precision. When the admissions officer mentioned concerns about campus accessibility, Emma pulled out detailed research she'd done on the university's facilities, complete with suggestions for improvements. "I'm not looking for a university that will make exceptions for me," Emma said clearly, her words carefully pronounced. "I'm looking for a university that understands that diversity includes disability, and that my perspective will make their program stronger." 2 weeks later, Georgetown offered Emma a full scholarship and invited her to serve on their Accessibility Advisory Committee. The trial proceedings provided another platform for Emma's voice. When the prosecutor asked if she wanted to provide a victim impact statement, Emma initially hesitated. Speaking in court, with her sometimes unclear speech in front of cameras and reporters, felt overwhelming. But as we sat in the courthouse corridor watching other victims share their stories, Emma made her decision. "Papa, I need to do this. Not just for me but for every kid who's been told they don't belong." Emma's victim impact statement was unlike anything the courtroom had heard. She didn't speak about the pain Karen had caused, though it was evident in her voice. Instead, she talked about dreams and possibilities. "Your Honor," Emma began, her words measured and clear, "when someone destroys a passport, they're not just destroying a document. They're trying to destroy the idea that some people deserve to explore the world. They're saying that some dreams aren't worth protecting." The courtroom was silent except for the sound of her voice. "But dreams are stronger than paper. And people like me, people with disabilities, we don't need anyone's permission to exist, to dream, or to achieve. What we need is what everyone needs: respect, opportunity, and the freedom to become who we're meant to be." She paused, looking directly at Karen, who was sitting at the defendant's table with her head down. "I forgive Ms. Mitchell for what she did to me. But I hope her punishment helps her understand that cruelty has consequences, and that every person deserves dignity." The judge, visibly moved, thanked Emma for her courage. Later, he told reporters that her statement had reinforced his decision to impose the maximum sentence. As Emma's high school graduation approached, our story took another unexpected turn. The French embassy contacted us, having heard about Emma's passion for French culture and her perseverance despite discrimination. They wanted to invite her to a special ceremony honoring young Americans who promoted international understanding. The ceremony was held at the ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C. Emma wore a beautiful blue dress and spoke in fluent French about how adversity had strengthened her love for other cultures. The ambassador was so impressed that he offered Emma a summer internship with the embassy's Cultural Affairs Division. "Papa," Emma whispered as we walked through the elegant halls filled with French art and history, "do you think Karen ever imagined that tearing up my passport would lead to all this?" "I don't think Karen imagined much beyond her own anger," I replied. "But I think she accidentally did something important. She showed you how strong you really are." The internship with the French embassy opened doors Emma had never imagined. She worked on cultural exchange programs, helped translate documents for international conferences, and even assisted with visa applications, including passports. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. During her internship, Emma met Marie Claire, a French disability rights advocate who was visiting Washington for a United Nations conference. Marie Claire had cerebral palsy too, and seeing her navigate international diplomacy with confidence and grace gave Emma a new vision for her future. "In France," Marie Claire explained over lunch, "we understand that diversity makes us stronger. Your story, your voice, they matter on the world stage." Emma's eyes lit up with possibility. "Do you think I could work in international relations? Really work in it, not just volunteer?" "Sherry," Marie Claire smiled, "I think you could change the world if you want to." That conversation planted seeds that would grow throughout Emma's college years. She declared a double major in international relations and disability studies, with a minor in French literature. Her professors were consistently impressed not just by her academic ability but by her unique perspective on global issues. Her senior thesis, Disability Rights as Human Rights, A Global Perspective, was selected for publication in the university's Law Review. She argued that true international cooperation required including disabled voices in diplomatic processes, and that countries' treatment of their disabled citizens was a key indicator of their commitment to human rights. The paper caught the attention of the State Department, who invited Emma to participate in a special program for emerging leaders in international affairs. At 21, she was the youngest participant ever selected, and the first person with a visible disability to join the program. Meanwhile, Karen's story took a different trajectory. After her release from prison, she moved to a small town in Montana where she'd inherited a cabin from her elderly aunt. Reports from mutual acquaintances suggested she was living quietly, working part-time at a local library and volunteering at a disability services center. I received a letter from her 2 years after Emma's graduation. It was different from her previous apology, less self-serving, more genuinely reflective. "Mr. Rodriguez," she wrote, "I've spent the last 3 years trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could hurt a child the way I hurt Emma. I've been working with a therapist and volunteering with disabled adults, and I'm beginning to see how my fear and ignorance turned into cruelty." The letter continued for several pages, detailing her work with disabled individuals and her growing understanding of the harm she'd caused. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to minimize her actions. Instead, she simply acknowledged the pain she'd inflicted and expressed hope that her volunteer work might somehow help other families avoid similar experiences. "I know I can never undo what I did to Emma or to your family," she concluded. "But I want you to know that her courage in court, her ability to forgive, and her determination to turn pain into purpose have changed my life. I'm not the same person who tore up that passport, and I hope I never will be again. I showed the letter to Emma, who read it carefully before setting it aside. What do you think? I asked. I think people can change, Emma said quietly. I think Karen needed to hit rock bottom before she could start climbing back up. I'm glad she's helping people now. Do you want to respond to her? Emma considered this for a long moment. Not yet. Maybe someday. But right now, I want to focus on moving forward, not looking back. Emma's career with the State Department exceeded every expectation. She was assigned to the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, where she worked on international disability rights initiatives. Her first major project involved developing accessibility standards for U.S. embassies worldwide, work that drew directly from her own experiences with discrimination and accommodation. The project required her to travel extensively, visiting embassies across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Each trip validated her childhood dreams of exploring the world, but more importantly, it demonstrated how her unique perspective could create real change for disabled people globally. In Prague, she identified architectural barriers that prevented disabled Czech citizens from accessing visa services. In Bangkok, she helped develop communication protocols for embassy staff working with deaf and hearing-impaired visitors. In Lagos, she created partnerships with local disability organizations to ensure that American cultural programs were inclusive and accessible. Papa, she called me from Rome during one of these trips, I'm standing in the same embassy where they process passport applications. I keep thinking about how Karen tried to prevent me from traveling, and now I'm here making sure other people with disabilities can travel too. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. My daughter, whose passport had been destroyed by someone who thought she didn't deserve to see the world, was now working to ensure that embassies worldwide welcomed all travelers with dignity and respect. Emma's work gained international recognition when she was invited to address the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Her speech, delivered in both English and French, outlined practical steps that governments could take to ensure equal access to diplomatic services for disabled citizens. Accessibility isn't charity, she told the Assembly, her voice strong and clear. It's a recognition that disabled people are full citizens with the same rights as everyone else. When we make our embassies, our airports, our cultural centers accessible, we're not doing disabled people a favor. We're fulfilling our basic obligations as democratic societies. The speech was viewed millions of times online and led to concrete policy changes in dozens of countries. Emma was recognized with the State Department's Superior Honor Award, becoming the youngest recipient in the program's history. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The mayor of our hometown declared Emma Rodriguez Day and invited her to speak at the annual community festival. The event was held in the same park where Karen had once complained about Emma's presence, and now hundreds of neighbors gathered to celebrate her achievements. The new HOA president, Margaret Chin, introduced Emma with words that brought tears to my eyes. Emma Rodriguez shows us that when we choose inclusion over exclusion, when we choose understanding over fear, when we choose love over hate, our entire community becomes stronger. Emma's speech that day was personal and heartfelt. She talked about growing up in a neighborhood where she initially felt unwelcome, about the kindness of neighbors who supported her family during difficult times, and about how adversity had taught her to find strength she didn't know she had. Home isn't just a place where you're from, she said, looking out at the crowd of familiar faces. It's a place where you're valued, where you belong, where you're encouraged to become your best self. I'm grateful that Maple Grove Estates became that place for me, and I hope it can be that place for every family who calls it home. After the speech, dozens of neighbors approached Emma to share their own stories. Some talked about family members with disabilities who'd been inspired by her example. Others mentioned policy changes in their own workplaces prompted by her advocacy. A few simply thanked her for showing them that different doesn't mean less valuable. As the evening wound down, Emma and I walked slowly through the neighborhood, taking in the changes that had occurred since Karen's departure. The community garden was thriving, with raised beds and accessible pathways that accommodated gardeners of all abilities. The new playground included equipment designed for children with various physical and cognitive needs. Street lighting had been improved, and sidewalks had been widened and properly maintained. But the most significant change wasn't visible in the infrastructure. It was in the community's attitude. Neighbors who had once viewed disability as a problem to be managed now saw it as a form of diversity to be celebrated. Children who had grown up alongside Emma understood inclusion as a natural part of community life. Papa, Emma said as we paused in front of our house, do you ever wonder what would have happened if Karen hadn't torn up my passport? I considered the question carefully. I think you would have achieved great things regardless. But maybe it would have taken longer and maybe your path would have been different. I think about that sometimes, Emma mused. If she hadn't been so cruel, I might not have realized how passionate I am about advocacy. I might not have found my calling. So in a strange way you're grateful? Emma was quiet for a long moment. I'm grateful for what came after. I'm grateful for the strength I discovered, for the people who supported us, for the opportunities that opened up. But I'm not grateful for the cruelty itself. No child should have to face that kind of hatred. Which is why your work matters so much, I said. You're making sure other children don't have to go through what you did. 5 years after Emma's UN speech, I received an invitation to her wedding. She was marrying David, a fellow diplomat she'd met during a conference on international accessibility standards. David, who was born with one arm, shared Emma's passion for disability rights and her love of travel. The wedding was held in the community garden that had been built after Karen's departure. A perfect symbol of growth and renewal. Emma walked down the aisle independently, her wheelchair decorated with flowers from the garden. The ceremony was conducted in 3 languages: English, French, and American Sign Language, reflecting the couple's commitment to inclusion. In her vows, Emma spoke about how love had sustained her through difficult times and given her courage to pursue her dreams. She thanked David for seeing her not as someone who needed to be fixed or protected, but as a partner in creating positive change in the world. You've taught me, she said, looking into his eyes, that the best relationships aren't about completing each other, but about supporting each other's growth and celebrating each other's achievements. As I watched my daughter dance with her new husband, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. From the morning when Karen destroyed Emma's passport to this celebration of love and possibility, we had traveled a path marked by challenges and triumphs, setbacks and breakthroughs. The framed pieces of Emma's torn passport still sit on her desk, now in her home office where she continues her work as a senior advisor on international disability policy. They serve as a daily reminder that dreams are indeed stronger than the people who try to destroy them. But more than that, they remind us that sometimes our greatest obstacles become our greatest opportunities. Karen's act of cruelty had inadvertently launched Emma on a trajectory that brought her more fulfillment and success than any of us had imagined possible. As I write this final chapter, Emma is pregnant with her first child, a daughter they plan to name Hope. She continues her work with the State Department while preparing for motherhood, already planning how she'll teach her daughter about resilience, compassion, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Karen's story, meanwhile, has reached its own conclusion. She passed away peacefully last month in Montana, surrounded by the staff from the Disability Center where she'd volunteered for nearly a decade. Her obituary mentioned her previous legal troubles but focused primarily on her later work supporting disabled individuals and their families. She left behind a letter addressed to Emma, along with a donation to the Emma Rodriguez Foundation for International Disability Rights, an organization Emma had established to fund accessibility improvements at embassies worldwide. The letter was brief but sincere. Emma, your forgiveness gave me the chance to become a better person. I hope the work I did in my final years helped other families avoid the pain I caused yours. Thank you for showing me that redemption is possible, even for someone who had lost her way as completely as I had. Emma read the letter with tears in her eyes, then carefully placed it alongside the torn passport pieces on her desk. She found her way back to being human, Emma said simply. I'm glad she had that chance. And so our story comes full circle, from destruction to redemption, from hatred to healing, from a torn passport to a life dedicated to ensuring that every person, regardless of their abilities or differences, has the opportunity to explore the world and pursue their dreams. The passport may have been torn, but the dreams it represented proved to be unbreakable. And in the end, that's the truth that matters most. That love conquers hate, that dignity triumphs over discrimination, and that the human spirit, no matter how battered, always finds a way to soar.